Good morning, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Must I say it's great to be back to the stream crowd after a horrendously long break, and no due to my own fault, of course. Which, sorry about that, forgot to mute that playback there. As you can see, I'm a bit rusty after a while, but other than that, please enjoy. Today's topic, which is not a very popular one right now in the game, but a topic that should be discussed nonetheless to prevent further, I guess what you could say, disasters or catastrophes as the community currently calls it. But in any case, as we all know, patch 4.25 launched not too long ago, and it was a small patch with not too much in it. I mean, you had 2 pieces of content, which the dev team pretty much said that, you know, that's all that we were going to get anyway in these half patches, is just 2 pieces of small content. This includes a new or unique type of content, or a quality of life adjustment, and a side story, or story quests, which include Hildebrand, also maybe closure to certain main story quests, side quests, or stuff like what we currently have, the Four Lords, which is the series of primals that we're going to see thus far in patch, or I should say, Stormblood expansion 4.0 series. There's one particular piece of content within this patch which caused much debate, and as well as uproar, you could say, within the community of Final Fantasy XIV, and this is not strictly just to things on the western side, but also things to the east as well as European as well. So, let's get down to what that content is. So, introduced in 4.25, we have the Forbidden Land of Eureka, which in most people's eyes was to be the most anticipated content of this expansion thus far, being as though it's completely new, or at least that's what most of us were expecting and hoping to see. But after giving it much thought, perhaps it's not as new as we had hoped, and in fact somewhat familiar, you could say. But anyway, before we get into the deeper details, let's first go into how Eureka is unlocked and such. So, in order to unlock Eureka, the Forbidden Land, which, by the way, it is a instance area, completely instanced. So you could say it's basically its own map, much like how we have maps in the open world, and that's similar to what this is. It's its own unique area, its own map, fleshed out to do a specific type of content, which we're gonna get into what that content is as soon as we get past the explanation of how to unlock. So, to unlock, you'll go to, first you're going to go to Rauger's Reach, and there, sitting right next to that retainer bell, and where all the crafting material suppliers and such are. I'm sure if you're endgame already, you already know what I'm talking about. There you will see Kryl from the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. And she has a quest for you. And this quest leads you into a chain of quests which go directly into the Forbidden Land of Eureka. So you follow Krau's direction, you head to Kugane. There you meet with a few other familiar faces. Those being Hancock and Rowena. And of course we always know whenever something involves Rowena, usually Geralt soon follows. And that's kind of what this Eureka was meant to be, is a place for where you can put, sort of, you know, time and effort into creating, like, your own set of weapons. At least that's what you would normally do. But also, featured in this, expansion, and in this type of relic grind, as most will call it, you also have armor, which you can increase and build upon to strengthen yourself further, to be able to challenge yourself to, let's say, hardcore content, such as previously released Final Coils of Bahamut and or Sigmascape Savage. So, in order to help as many players as possible to obtain basically that same status quo as these hardcore players that we see, the development team thought, why not put this all into Eureka, the relic, this time, instead of just making it so that, you know, you're gonna spend several plus hours to grind just weapons. They're including also gear. And as I said before, just now, it's to help as many people get to that end-game hardcore content as much as possible. And so that everyone sort of has a foot in the door, if you would, to experience this content. And that's why they opened up this Eureka, the Forbidden Land of Eureka, to kind of help, you know, maybe your mid-core to lower to casual players to sort of get somewhat of a boost. However, that boost may not be so fortunate to most people, and we'll discuss why that is in just a bit here. So after you're done talking to, you know, Rowena, Hancock, Corral, they take you to the docking area in Kugane, and there you meet a scholarly fellow, which is an acquaintance of Corral's, who is said to be a survivor of the students of Baldessian, which, if you follow the main story, you'll know who those people are, and the story revolving around them. If not, then I would suggest that you mute your headset or mute your audio now, because this could be potentially a spoiler to you if you have not gotten past the story up to that point. So, I'm going to give you just a few seconds to do that now. Okay. Now, for those of you who are still listening with audio on, then you know that the story of the students of Baldessian, and more importantly, of Kral here, is that they were on an island charted out far past Eorzean lands, an island which was called the Isle of Vel. Now, what's significant about this island, you say, was that a spectacular event took place here, as documented by Kral herself, and told to you by Minfilia in the main story, that the island just up and vanished into thin air due to a disruption in the current ether flow. And as Kral puts it, a very powerful magic was used in this process, which caused this island to suddenly disappear into a rift, she calls it. So, she naturally wouldn't trust anyone else but us to handle this task, as well as a survivor of the students of Baldessian, which, again, when we're dealing with the students of Baldessian, this Isle of Vel is significant in that it was their home base, their headquarters, you could say. And so, basically your role here, besides the relic grind, to strengthen yourself up further to reach the hardcore endgame content, you're also unraveling the mystery of what happened to this island, the Isle of Vel, and the students of Baldessian, which were allegedly there. So Krile is with there, giving us sort of directions and leads, or what you would call hints, as to what we need to do to basically figure out this mystery behind the island, and why it suddenly appeared far to the east of all places, of course, and what caused it to reappear. And that's basically, you know, sort of the lore and story aspect of things in Forbidden Land of Eureka. Now, when we get to the actual contents itself, this involves a very sort of heavily grind, you could say, as, again, I've brought this up already multiple times, and the grind consists of gathering a certain type of material to further strengthen the weapons that you have. Now, you think, ugh, grinding, that's so off-putting. And well, you're right, it can be stressful and annoying at the same time. And as you know, with the previous expansions Relic Grind, there was a whole lot of grinding. What with crystals and, you know, Beastman currencies which you needed to trade for items to further upgrade your Anemos, and further, you know, just go upgrade several weapons and light farm. We all know the whole deal with the relics, so I don't think I need to really explain everything that we did in the past. The same thing sort of applies here, but rather than having to grind like severely, like gathering like crystals or such, it's actually a bit different per se. But the difference isn't really all too different. It's actually quite similar to what we've been used to here in eorzea. And what I mean by that is, essentially, you'll do content X amount of times to receive X amount of, you know, crystals or whatever materials you're needing to gather to strengthen your weapons. Now, like I said, this isn't strictly for weapons, this Forbidden Land of Eureka, which, by the way, to shorten this name, Eureka Anemos is what they call this step in the relic grind, which Anemos was a very clever hint at what we were looking at here on this portion of the island. I say portion, yes, because as some have noted, there is bigger parts of the island which we are yet to see, and perhaps will see in the future as this gets updated further. So Anemos, like I'm saying, was a clever hint, because it means, like, it's an allusion to, I guess you could say, a Greek god, or figurehead, which controls wind, or, you know, air, essentially. Air currents, which is what we just use to describe wind elements and such. So, very clever name teaser there. We think mostly this involves wind. Well, it's half true and not true. For you see, you were given in Eureka what they call a magia board. And this magia board consists of, you know, your 5 different elements, you know, fire, wind, water, lightning, etc. So you have all these elements on this wheel. And what are they for? Well, they're to take down enemies, basically, within this area, this zone, that you're going to be spending multiple hours grinding out. And basically, what this does, this magia board, it offers you a measure of some protection and some offense. There's a big detailed chart which is explained to you right as you get into Eureka. You'll talk to an NPC there that's right near those entryways to the actual field map itself that you will be running around. And this scholarly NPC figure will tell you all about the magia board. And basically what he tells you is that each element corresponds to another element, and they will be used to defend yourself as well as strike damage to your foes that you encounter. And this is important because basically what it's telling you is that your foes will use a certain element or be aspected to a certain element. And what you'll want to do is use the opposite element to strike them down. So starting off, when you do the first quest, they already hand you what you need, which is, they're calling a protein crystal of sorts. And you're going to use this particular protein crystal, or either aspected crystal node, to strengthen your element grids. So, as I said, 5 different elements, so that's 5 elements for you to strengthen. Now, you can focus on one, or you can focus on multiple. They've given you free rein to decide on which you would like to focus on. However, keep in mind, focusing on solely one will kind of make things a little bit more harder and more difficult. And the reason why is because, as I was talking to you how each element corresponds to another, you also need the same element to defend yourself from oncoming attacks. So, for example, let's say your enemy is a water-aspected enemy. So, in order to take less damage, you will need the same element to defend yourself against it. Not too complicated, seems pretty straightforward. But you also need, like I said, the opposite element to whatever element you're fighting against. So, as I said, water, the opposite of that would be earth. Or thunder, in this case. So, taking that in mind, you're going up against this enemy, water aspected. You have the water node to defend, and you have the lightning to strike against it. This lightning helps you increase the damage dealt. So, it's very important that you pay attention to that as you're going through this content. That you have these elements all synced out, and that you're not focusing solely on one, but preferably 3 different elements. Now, I say 3 because you are supposed to rotate elements on this board for when you encounter different enemies on the map itself. Now with this Magia board there is a limitation, however. You can only roll over 5 times. So, that means, say you're in a group and they want to farm a particular mob, then that means that everyone needs to have the same aspected element plus the opposite to strike down the enemies and farm them for some EXP. Now there's a strange word to say for a relic weapon grind. EXP. Yes, there is actually EXP that has to be gained here. And this EXP is called your elemental experience points. And you say, well, what does that have to do with my weapon? Well, what it has to do with your weapon is that the higher the level of your, element level, the better you will do, and the faster you'll be able to down enemies. Now comes the more difficult aspects and parts of Eureka that we'll talk about now. In this forbidden land of Eureka, there are certain aspects of this content which are not very favorable in the eyes of most people who have already done this, or have started it for the first time. And that, of course, is being, first off, the E-experience, like I told you. It's honestly not that great. In fact, it can be at times terrible. Like, especially if you were trying to do this solo, which they've already encouraged people to try solo. If teamwork isn't really their sort of style of play, if they want to do this just by their lonesome. However, I don't know if this was a bug or if this was intended, but the E-experience gained by solo, as well as by group, it's really not so great. And in fact, you're earning severely less. And with that in mind, the biggest complaint about that is that this will take several hours and possibly even days to complete. And they aren't wrong. Because, as I said, they decided to also keep this as a soloable content, which, in all entirety, it isn't really that much of a soloable content at all. In fact, you are very heavily required to work with a team in order to achieve your objectives, and also to obtain the item which you need. Which, by the way, the item that you are required to upgrade your gear and your weapon here, they're called Anemos crystals. As you get these, you're going to exchange them to the NPC Geralt, who's also by the main hub area as you start in Eureka. And you'll exchange these crystals in order to get protein crystals, which are used to power up your gear and your weapon. Now, you don't have to necessarily have a team to achieve this, as I said, but having the team is all the more vital to your success. But again, with the experience problem that's there, it still makes this very, very difficult and quite frustrating to most people who jump in. Because the EXP gained from just a Simu mob alone is very, very insignificant. And then also, there's something else that they've added in this area of Eureka, which they call a notorious monster. Which really, when you look at it on the surface, it's basically a fate. Only you don't have mobs per se to deal with, you just have this one sort of boss to fight. And these bosses will appear at random on a time interval, which rotates around like every few hours or so. Or rather, I believe their idea was to have them rotate like every, I don't know, 20 or so minutes, because when you're thrown in here, you're only given about an hour and a half's time to spend in this instance before you're essentially kicked out. Now you'll ask, why would they make an instant zone timed? Well, the answer is quite simple, and that's because they want to keep server stability. And they want the servers to be stressed out and to crash, sending multiple people into disconnections, as well as, the 90K error where there was a failure between communication between your PC or your console to the server itself, because the data being read was too much for your system to handle all at once. Thus did you end up disconnecting from their server entirely. So that's why they have the timer put in place here in this instant zone. It's so that they can keep the servers stable and running. Now that's also something else that we've seen elsewhere. A timer, an instant zone, with fate-like monsters. It sounds all too familiar to most of us who've been playing this game, or what you would call us veterans. And a lot of people have already begun to compare it to a certain content that we've done before in the past. That being, dare I say it, and I will say it because that's why we're talking and reviewing here, and that's Diadem. Now that content was very much the same, in which you would spend relentless hours grinding out sort of monsters and just fate-like things to achieve what you need to do in order to, either obtain a reward that you seem to fancy, or if you just wanted to have something to do. Now, initially, it was a success, Diadem, at the start when it was launched. People jumped in, they tried it, they had fun, did it for a while, but then it soon grew a bit stale and lacking. And that's where it began to really fall under course. And because it was just so monotonous, so grind heavy, people just stopped doing it altogether. And some people even stopped playing the game because they had done already everything else that was in the game to keep their attention, and they just decided, it wasn't really worth it. So people would either unsubscribe and wait till another big patch came, or some would only log in, say, once a week to do their weekly tome limits, or weekly rating rewards, stuff like that, and then you wouldn't see them for the rest of the week. Now this caused the queue times for the regular players, or those who play every other day or maybe twice or 3 times a week. This caused quite some trouble to get things accomplished for them, because there's just simply not enough players around to keep things running and up and going. So, development handled this challenge again. They relaunched Diadem 2.0, people will call it, and hoped that it would change people's mind about the game and make them come back. They weren't mistaken, of course. People did come back. They tried it out. Some had fun, some didn't. But eventually, the same problem as before. The content just was so lackluster and too grind heavy that people just gave up on it. And it fell under. And to this day, it's still not even touched. People have just abandoned Diadem completely. And of course, when the producer and director of this game, Naoki Yoshida, was asked about such things as these, his response was, "Well, we don't commit content to last forever. And we understand, of course, that content will eventually become stale and uninteresting after done multiple times. So we'll just pretty much let them trickle off and eventually remove them entirely from the game." And if you want a perfect example of that already, in PvP, they've already removed something, content which was very lacking and not interesting to players anymore, and that was the Wolves' Den. I'm sure a lot of the PvP community can remember that, of course, where you had the traditional or custom matches in the Wolves' Den. They've since removed those as of patch 4.0 and Stormblood expansion. Those are now gone because people, they just didn't queue up for them anymore and they didn't find it interesting. And we're seeing the same thing here with the Diadem, of course, and when asked about that, the development team were saying that they were discussing what to do with the Diadem, and eventually, since we can take and infer what happened with PvP, then likely the same thing will happen with Diadem. It will be completely removed. And the rewards which were obtainable within will most likely be recycled elsewhere. Most likely they'll be either recycled as an additional reward to Eureka, or they will be added to the gold saucer. Which it seems like that's where most rewards for dead content seems to end up nowadays, is the golden saucer. Because the golden saucer, for some reason, seems to be like the place where people will kind of go to when they've lost, you know, all hope of anything else to do. They just kind of, you know, flock over to the golden saucer to have something, at least something to do, you know? Which feels kind of bad. Like that's the only way that they can keep the gold saucer running, is by cycling, you know, old content through. Now the next thing about Eureka, other than the experience problem that it has, is that you solely have to rely on other players' help, as I mentioned earlier in this video. Without teamwork, you suffer heavily. And to punish you even further, After you obtained level 6 in your elemency, as they call it, your element level, you are punished for dying. So say you were just trying to catch up and meet up with people that were trying to do a notorious monster fate. And it's understandable why you would, because these fates, not only do they give you the Anemos crystals, which gives you the protein, which you need for your weapons and your gear, but they also reward you with some pretty decent experience points to your elemency level. So let's say you're trying to run and meet up with this, but all of a sudden, you die, because there's a higher mob chasing you. Well, what are you going to do? You're prompted to return. However, if you should return, then you lose experience points. It's sort of putting a penalty on the player for wanting to experience the content. Now, where's the fairness in that, you ask? To put it plainly, there is no fairness. That only makes it so that you have to keep playing the content. And I think in their mind, the devs see there's nothing wrong with that, because it's keeping you inside this content. However, what they hadn't anticipated is that that is not the case. This makes many of us players upset, angry even. And there's been a huge uproar, in fact, on the official forums, in both NA forums and as well as Japan forums. People are not happy that this is the choice the development team chose to go with. Because let's say, for example, you've spent hours and days and maybe a week to get to the max elemency, but then you die. And as soon as you hit that res button, there goes all the hard work that you worked so hard on. This has made a lot of people already abandon this content and never touch it. Layered on top of, the experience problem, like I said, you're making comparatively less experience than what you can get from these notorious monster spawns, which only spawn ever so often. And people theorize that farming a certain mob in an area will make those fates spawn quicker. However, this is neither denied nor confirmed by Square Enix. So we really don't even know if doing this sort of farming of these monsters, these normal mobs, is even making these like fate monsters even spawn. For all we know, they could just be set on a certain cycle, as I mentioned earlier, where they rotate. So let's say Fate Monster A spawns and then is killed. That rolls into Fate Monster B. Fate Monster B dies, then C and D and etc. It just goes off on a set timer, basically, from, when this monster's dead, moving on to the next Fate monster. But there's always the wait in between, however. And then you have an excruciatingly long wait after all Fate monsters have spawned and been killed. It seems like it takes even further longer to wait for the rotation to restart over again. Now, you ask, well, what are we supposed to do in that time? What do they expect us to do? Well, they want you to farm more monsters. But that, again, is a problem, because the experience from farming these is not enough. It's not nearly enough. And in fact, farming the monsters is only really good for getting you those protein crystals that you need. They don't help your elemency level go up that much at all. So if you were looking just to get your gear, then I suppose you could just farm those monsters. But it's difficult to farm monsters that are higher level than you, thus forcing you to stay confined to a certain zone. And as I said, this is not a very fair advantage to those who've already gotten ahead. And myself and others have already seen there are multiple players who've already obtained the max cap for this content. And it's because either A, they had a good group, or groups, or B, because they cheated somehow. Now, I can't really gainsay which one it is. Either they had good groups or they didn't. Either they cheated or they didn't. It's a known thing to the development team, of course, that cheating is a thing in this game. Now, let's take again, like I said, the experience problem. You start at the bottom. And even starting at the bottom, it takes excruciatingly long. Many hours in order to reach the max level. And when you have these players that have already achieved that level within 1 or 2 days, that tells you that there is a huge issue here. A very big issue. And that's what has a lot of people up in arms and frustrated over on the official forums and everywhere, basically. Is that they're frustrated about this. How come this player, or this group, how come they're already there when I'm at the bottom here and it's taking me excruciatingly long hours to do? Now, going back to this notorious monster thing, it would have been difficult for them to even attempt these at the lower level. So before, even try to defend that they farm these fates, there's only like 1 or 2 of them that start you off at level 1. And as I said, they go off on a rotation, a cycle of time. You can't honestly expect to convince me or others that may be lower leveled that they just sat there and farmed that one particular fate over and over and over. Because this still would have taken a lot of time. So, how did they achieve that in the fastest time, you say? It's easy. They cheated. They cheated to get that far, to get what they wanted. But even then, these alleged cheaters are still stuck. And you say, how is that possible? Well, that's because of the system that Square Enix built into Eureka here. You're required to do the content. You're required to do it in order to get the weapons, to get the armor, and also the exclusive drops which you receive from a reward to incentivize this content to keep people playing what they call these loot crates or loot boxes. And that in itself is something we're also familiar with as veterans. As we've also seen this, again, in Diadem. And we've seen this in Palace of the Dead as well. So this draws us to the two conclusions now. Eureka may not have been at all what we expected, what we were assuming it to be. Where we were all expecting it to be something fresh, something new. It just turned out to be something that's reused, reworked, something we've already seen before. It is in fact not very new to us. And that's the part that makes a lot of the community sad. And also a lot of people vocal and angry, like I said. We're sad, we're angry, frustrated that this content which we were expecting and anticipating turned out to be a huge letdown. That all they did was took concepts from content that we've already had, existing content, and just reused it. And the other thing is, that has people frustrated, is that this Eureka was delayed. They said the reasoning for the delay, further testing needed for stability. Well, apparently that testing for what you'd call stability was really just to stress test the servers. There's no thought, no effort put into making this a fresh experience whatsoever, other than the fact that you are punished from dying, as well as you are required to have certain elements to even make this content bearable and make it so that you don't die as often. But again, there's that crippling experience. It is not nearly enough to help people get by, to help people catch up. And so, what worries most of the player base of Final Fantasy XIV is that this is just going to be another diadem, and that given in a week's time, 2, 3 maybe weeks, it will just be dead. It will be done and over with, and no one will revisit again. And this really sucks for newer players who've just obtained their level 70. And they're thinking, well, what can I do now? Should I try Eureka? They ask their friends or their free company, their link show. To which they'll answer, no, sorry. You missed your chance. It failed. It fell under and there's nobody doing it anymore. And then we're again going back to that attitude to the producer, Naoki Yoshida, has towards content, endgame content. It's going to trickle off eventually. We don't expect this content to last forever. And forever this is not going to last. Because there's just too many issues that we, the existing players, the faithful and loyal players of the game, have already seen. Maybe to someone who's jumping in for the first time may not see this. Maybe they didn't do Daedom back in Heaven's Ward. I mean, sure, it may see something new to them. Something they haven't done before. But to the people who've stayed here continuously, backing Square Enix the whole time, paying a sub to keep the servers up and running, to make it so that our producer, who doesn't have this very good attitude towards his content nor his player base, to make sure that he keeps a job. And that is the hard fact of the matter that we get to with Eureka. is that because of us existing players continuing our support of the game, and this is all that we've got to show for it, recycled, reused content, well, that's just like a big open palm slap to the face, saying, we have your money, you gave us your money, so what else do you expect? We're not going to go any further past anything new. You're just going to receive what we give you and you're going to like it and be happy, or don't. We don't care. That's the attitude that we're seeing from this development team now. Unless we act and stand together now, voice our opinions, and I'm not talking about you newer players. It's okay that you like this, that it's something new for you. I'm very glad, in fact, that you are enjoying it. But for how long will you get to enjoy it until it's gone? Us veteran players are not going to stick around. And you'll wonder why. Why you're in an empty link shell, a dead free company no one logs into. You'll be wondering what went wrong. Why do you pay a sub, you'll wonder. There's no one to play with. They've all left to other games. And that's the hard truth which I explained to you. The attitude and direction that this development team is going in. That is your answer. Now, aside from all that, let's talk about what they could possibly improve on. We've got all the negativity out of the way. I'm sorry that was brought up, in fact. But it is, like I said, a very frustrating thing for us, the players who've always been here, helping out the new players to reach those goals. But to us, it's just all a repetitive and very stale cycle. And as I said, it is also an insult to us as well, that we have a development team that takes our money, the money that keeps these servers up and running, as well as gives them a job, the development team, that this money is not being used as it should be. Now, I don't wholly blame the development staff, or even Naoki Yoshida. Mistakes happen. People make them. We're not all perfect. But again, we don't have to sit here and accept it. We have to make suggestions. We have to criticize. Give feedback. Because us standing up as a community, giving feedback and criticisms, this will give the dev team thoughts on how they can improve, thoughts on what they can do better. And that's what we need to do the very most right now, is we need to all stand together on one front. and agree to disagree on what needs to be done for future content. And so that we continue to have the game that we know and we love. The game that we've paid for and supported. And like I said, this isn't necessarily a development problem. This could very well be a budget problem. Maybe this budget is not as high as we were led to believe when the comment was made by Naoki Yoshida accidentally, as he put it, that it wasn't something he was meaning to say or meant to say, but was said, that their team received triple the budget for Stormblood. Well, it seems like triple that budget was spent on marketing, advertising, and that's just really messed up. You can't really sit here and tell someone that isn't messed up. Someone who pays for your game. You spent all that budget just so that you could spread the word out. Maybe get, I don't know, 1,000 new subs, 1,000 new faces to the game. Sure, that may seem good in light of things, but that has cost so much in content and development. As we've seen with Eureka. That cost has taken away a dungeon, has taken away a trial, has taken away a new type of content, a new PvP. So it's plain to see that something needs to happen within the company. Someone has to step up from this development team, because it doesn't seem like the producer is going to. Someone has to step up and tell them they need either more staff or more money to develop what the player base demands. What they've been asking for the whole time. And a lot of people are afraid of confrontation. We get it. It's hard to talk to your boss and ask for a raise. Everyone knows that. It's just common knowledge from here. But sometimes you have to give it a chance. And you really have to step your foot down and make those shots called. Even if that answer is no, they can't give them any more budget than they already have, then perhaps they need to hire different people, or they need to have more people on the team to restructure, recode, whatever they need to do just to make something new and refreshing to us. That's all that we as the player base ask, is for some more variety, basically. That's what we all want. More variety of content to do. And not variety that's recycled content. We want something new and unique. Something that's fun. Not this Eureka, which is grindingly heavy. So much to the point you want to scream and yell at your screen or TV. Not so much that it punishes you even for failing to get somewhere. That's not what we meant by challenging. When people asked for something more challenging, that's not what they meant at all. So, again, let's go back and offer what could be changed. What could make Eureka a little more exciting? Or perhaps, I don't know, more, what's the word? More relevant to us. I'll give my suggestions in this video. If you have others, please feel free. Mention them in the comments down below. I'd very much appreciate what you have to suggest or have feedback on regarding Eureka, or even the development team of 14 or of the company Square Enix itself. Give me your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them. But let me give you my suggestions and my feedback on what should be done with Eureka and future content spanning outward from here. As a veteran player, me speaking to you as to another veteran and or new player. So firstly, they really need to fix the experience issue in Eureka. They need to make it so that it's more balanced. And by balance, I mean to say, make it so that experience isn't so heavily dependent on individual performance, but dependent on whether you have the proper elements against your foes who also share a different or same element. So, example, if you have an element which matches your supposed opponent or enemy's element on the field, you go to attack them. Let's say that you having the same element buffs the amount of experience you gain by, let's say, I don't know, give it like a 15, maybe 10%. Okay, well there you go, that's good. That gives you a little more EXP than what you would gain normally. The other thing, have it so that as you progress and you level up, have it so that the experience scales with that level. Not that it decreases or goes further down or remains the same. It needs to scale with the level. Just like within PvE that we have already, the same thing needs to happen here in Eureka. The experience needs to scale with that level. And again, tossing in a bonus with the whole element thing, that would not hurt it at all. That would in fact make it more worthwhile to do with groups or alone. Now let's say especially if you have the opposite element needed to cause additional damage to the mob that you're striking down. So let's go back to water element. Say you have watermelon to defend and watermelon to attack. Or sorry, lightning element, the opposite of water. Let's say you have both those achieved. So instead of getting that 10%, you'll stack on another 10%. So you'll be getting 20% more experience on top of the level skill. This will make the grind a lot more less painful. And it will make the experience overall more enjoyable. And it will be a grind that myself and maybe others jumping in will take on and will enjoy it. You know, put some iTunes or some YouTube videos or whatever, put some music on to grind through it, because the grind is not as painful as it is currently. Having it scale with your level, having bonuses be applied to having the opposing and the same element at the right time against the right mob, that would definitely help with the experience issue here, and would make the grind far more enjoyable to do and less painful, less agonizing. The next thing, drop rates from fates. The experience is already good. I don't think there needs to be too much of improvement on there. Again, it just has to scale with levels. It needs to match the current level of the player that's participating. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mindless waste of time. Now again, with the drop rates, executing chains, there should be more reward, more protein awarded for executing chains. Let's say 5 protein per chain executed. So that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. This would also greatly help. It would make people want to do more than just one relic armor and relic gear, or relic weapon, sorry. Because they know for sure by executing a chain, they're going to get more and more of what they need. More protein for their weapons to develop and their armor to develop. This is going to make people, definitely, myself included, want to work on more than just one set. Because I don't want to solely just focus on my main set. I wouldn't mind, like, say, upgrading my summoner set, or my machinist set, or even my Dark Knight set. I wouldn't mind upgrading those further. And doing them in something like Eureka would be a lot more enjoyable than compared to just the mindless, senseless weekly tome cap grind. Or, you know, the weekly Sigma escape raiding cap, you know? This would be something that would be thoroughly enjoyable if the payout for experience and for crystals needed was significantly increased. This would definitely make it a lot more worthwhile. Now with the loot boxes, my suggestion on those. It's fine that everything you get is a surprise. I understand maybe there's something someone would really want and prefer over others, but can't because the random number generator system keeps giving them, let's say, like those annoying fireworks or outdated material which is no longer necessary or wanted. They can't get that specific item because you keep getting these. So my suggestion for these loot crates or loot boxes, whatever you want to call them, is make it so that even should a player receive the lowest rank in the fate, make it so that that player still gets compensated with a loot crate. It doesn't have to be a lot. Let's just say throw them like 2 crates. And that would be perfectly acceptable. It would mean that at least they put some effort in to trying to help the group, down this notorious monster. And that the reward is not only a certain portion of EXP, but also 2 crates. This would greatly incentivize more people to keep coming back in and cycling through instances to keep doing Eureka. Make it so that they're still getting something out of this, doing these notorious monsters with groups of people, by giving them a couple crates, 2, 3, or 3, and then as they go, they're able to do more, and these fake monsters, these Anemos, as they're abbreviated as they're able to level up and do more, have it so that, if they receive a better ranking the next time, increase that number to like 6 or 8 or so. And then for the highest ranking, just keep it the same. Keep the highest ranking one about the same. 15, 20 boxes. 20 crates. And those are basically my suggestions on how to improve Eureka. I hope you will take them with a grain of salt. I understand your frustration, angry, I do, as I've already shown in this video prior to getting to the suggestion part here. I understand that the frustration is directed at the development team. Maybe it's not directed at them, maybe it's directed at Yoshida, Naoki Yoshida, the producer, and his attitude towards things. Or maybe it's not even directed at him, maybe it's directed at the gaming company that develops the game itself. I assure you, I understand your feelings wholly and completely. But again, as I said, we need to work together, and we need to cooperate with one another, and voice our concerns, voice our critiques, our criticisms. We need to do this in order for the company and the development team to understand what we as consumers and as players want. We don't have to be demanding to get what we want. We don't have to act like spoiled children in their eyes. We can show them that we're civilized, that we can band together like adults, as most of us are who play this game, in fact, young adults. Some of us are even full adults. If we act our ages, and I'm not, of course, saying encouraging bad behavior from those who might be younger. If you're a younger player, please do have respect. But for those of us that are adults, we need to act like it. And we need to show Square Enix and this development team that we can act like adults. And that we can voice our concerns creatively. Because once we do that, and we establish positive communication between each other, like rational adults should, then we'll have a product worth paying for, worth buying. A product worth staying subbed for. And those will be my closing notes for this video. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope that you found this review hopefully interesting and maybe inspiring. Maybe it helped you think a little bit. Maybe it just made you more angry. And then maybe you didn't get to the end of this video to hear my thanks. That is okay. Like I said, I understand that some of you are frustrated and angry. I'm right there with you as a veteran player. And I can understand wholly and completely why that would be. I myself, I don't really know who to blame, to be honest. I don't know if it's the development team. I don't know if it's their budget, or if it's their bosses, or if it's the company that oversees the project. I really don't know. But I'd like to keep my faith with the development team and believe that the issue is with, in fact, the budget and company itself. And like I said, we need to stay rational. Think like adults, be adults. For those of us that are. I know there are kids that play the game. You kids don't have to worry about this. Just let us adults handle the adult matters, and you just keep doing what you do. Enjoy the game, regardless. And we hope that you will continue to keep enjoying the game. Because this is not only something that we play with strangers, as it is an MMO online game, but it's a game that we play with our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, our family members. It's a game that we play with everyone. And it should feel like a very enriching, enjoyable experience. It should be fun. And that's all we want from the development team, really, is just that. Something that is welcoming, something that is fun and enjoyable. Thanks everyone. Thanks for hearing me rant. For offering my critique, my criticisms, and my suggestions. Take them as you will. I want to hear your thoughts as well, and opinions on Eureka. How it turned out for you. What you liked, what you didn't like. What you would change. And any thoughts you have overall for Square Enix and this community. Amadeus Aeon out. And we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.